Welcome, everyone. Thank you for coming out this Wednesday. My name is Ramon Stern. I'm the administrative manager of the Brazil Initiative. Um, the director, James Green, sends his apologies that he couldn't be here today, so I will be presenting, giving a presentation, introducing the speaker. I was just, apresentar is the word in Portuguese, so I was just thinking in Portuguese there. Um, but before introducing our speaker, I just wanted to bring to people's attention, first of all, that I have schedules for the semester here in my hand. If anybody at the end of the talk wants access to this piece of paper, or you can email Brazil with a Z, Brazil, at brown.edu and ask to be on the events list so that you're informed about the events as they are happening throughout the semester. Um, and Next week, also on Wednesday at 12 p.m., we will have Luiz Inácio Adams, who's a private attorney in Brazil, does a lot of work on anti-corruption and other issues, who'll be talking about challenges to the Brazilian Constitution. Is our democracy in jeopardy? We'll see whether that's a rhetorical question or an actual question next week. We will also have a screening of a really powerful documentary that just won a prize at the Montreal Black Film Festival called Sem Descanso, Restless, from 2018. It's about a black young man from Salvador, Bahia, who disappears after the military police enters his community, and his father's search for answers. That will be happening next Thursday, October 10th at 7 p.m. here in Jakowski. We'll be screening that film free for everybody to enjoy, so it'd be good to have a good turnout for that as well, especially because we will have the director, Bernardo Attal, and the producer, Gerluzzi Santana, will be having a conversation with people after the film. So that would be very good for people to come out and see that as well. And then the following week, we have two other talks. We have Kia Caldwell, who will be talking about reflections on black feminism, political power, and violence in Brazil. And that's on Wednesday, October 16th, also at 12 here in Jakowski. On Thursday, October 17th at 12 p.m. in the Portuguese and Brazilian Studies Conference Room, which is on 159 George Street. John Willis will be here to talk about fake news and the violation of rights in Bolsonaro's Brazil. So that's all happening over the next 2 weeks. The week after that, just so that you know, we will, on October 24th through 26th, we will be having a film festival of Brazilian films. 5 Brazilian films, 1 film on the 24th, and then on the 25th and the 26th, there will be 2 films each. And that'll be in Granoff Center and Martino's Auditorium. And I won't go through all the times for the films, but that's just to be on your radar so that you know that it's happening. If you have any other questions just about our schedule or anything of that nature, you can ask me after the talk, or just pick up this calendar. Okay, now I'm going to introduce our illustrious speaker, Dr. Marlise Matos, who's Associate Professor of Political Science at the Federal University of Minas Gerais, UFMG, one of the top 5 universities in Brazil and the largest federal university. She holds a bachelor's degree in psychology and a master's degree in psychoanalytical theory, and received her PhD in sociology from the University Research Institute of Rio de Janeiro. Dr. Matos directs NEPEN, the Center for Studies and Research on Women at the Federal University of Minas Gerais, whose mission is to develop research and teaching on gender relationships in Brazilian society and to extend a gender perspective throughout the university. Under her tenure, Dr. Matos has focused on consolidating gender, race, and sexuality as relevant themes for academia. She is committed to recognizing and reconsidering the contributions of feminist leaders, feminist intellectuals, and the feminist and women's movement from the Global South. Her main research and publication interests include gender and politics, feminist critical theory, identity politics, gender and public policy, sexual and reproductive rights, women, democracy, and citizenship. And her talk today is Violence Against Women in Politics, the case of Dilma Rousseff. If everyone could please give a really warm welcome to Dr. Marlise Matos.
So good morning, good afternoon, everybody. Really nice to be here today. I would like to really thank Ramon in first line and also Professor James Green for the invitation. For me, it's an honor and will be really an opportunity to share with you something that really bothers me in Brazil. And I think this is not only a Brazilian problem, you know. And I would like to discuss this with you today. And I hope you we can have many discussions and dialogues, and maybe you can help me also to understand the issues and the problems addressed to this kind of violence that sometimes is completely invisible for many people. So in this presentation, I would like to start with a context, updated data on women in politics worldwide, in the Americas, and also in Brazil, because this is another thing that people are not aware about the situation of truly exclusion of women from the political scene, the institutional posts and the parliamentary posts are completely in absence of women. So I would like to show you that. Then I will discuss with you why it is important to address the violence against women in politics and what is violence against women in politics. And after, I would like to go to the context of Dilma's coup in Brazil in 2016. And then a very quick, very brief commentary about my methodological approach here, because I will use images, something like a socio-political approach on images. I will try to show you what I am thinking methodologically about that. And I will show the material, the empirical material. They talked about, they are concerned about this 11 mechanisms of political sexist violence before, during, and after Dilma's impeachment. And then some final comments about violence and the democratization of, especially of Brazilian state. And we have really huge problems about democracy in Brazil today. And this is part of our problems, not of our solutions, you know, about democracy in Brazil. So let's start. Latin American countries, we lived the third democratizing wave. And in the 2000s, democracy advances strengthening with ups and downs all over the region. I would like to show you this map. This is the presidents of Latin America, the women presidents that were elected today in Latin America. I observed, I researched also the situation of Michelle Bachelet and Cristina Kirchner, and they have experienced the same kind of violence that Dilma also experienced, you know, in the situation of being presidents of their countries. So I think this is something that is spread out all over the region, but unfortunately all over the world, you know. So the international comparable indicator for women in politics is the percentage of women in the lower houses, because we have different systems, political systems all over the world, but they have, almost all of them have the lower house. So we can compare the countries using the percentage of women in the lower houses. So this institute, the Interparliamentary Union from the United Nations, are collecting data about the elections all over the world. So this is my main source here. So we reached, the data was updated on the 1st of April of this year. So we reached 24.3% on the average of representation of women in the lower chambers. And the first country in the world is Rwanda in Africa, with 61.3% of women in politics. In the Americas, we reached an average of 28.2%, and in the United States, 23.6% of women in the lower chamber. And in Brazil, the situation is completely astonishing, because we have only an average of 15% of representation of women in the House of Representatives in Brazil. And this is the percentages all over the world and their sub-regions. So we can see the Nordic countries advance in the situation. And we can see that mainly in the Middle East, in Africa, in the Pacific, when the situation is very difficult for women in politics because of many things, but mainly because of the conservative culture in gender relations, we have something like 18%, 19%, and Brazil is practicing 15% of women in politics. So this is the situation of the Americas. In the color, the green color, you can see the countries that already surpassed 30% of this kind of representation. In the middle, in yellow, the countries that have approximately 17 to 29%. And in the below, we have the countries that didn't reach 17%. And Brazil is just right here. You can see. We are in the company of Paraguay, Bahamas, and Belize. So this is the situation of Brazil, because when we talk about politics and women's representation, and we are going to talk about violence against women in politics, we need to know how few they are in this field. You know, we really need to understand that we are talking of exclusion and a process of systematic exclusion of women of politics. So Brazil, in the context of the Americas, it's not in any leading position. On the contrary, Brazil occupies a pitiful one, and with modest 15%, trying with Paraguay and losing in context of the Americas just for Bahamas, Belize, and Haiti. So the United States also occupies an acceptable position, and with 23.3%. So this is the context. And I would like also to show you this maps, because we have really a shift in Latin American countries. And I think the situation of violence against women in politics has to do with this new conservative turn that we are living in Brazil, and also in many other countries in Latin America and all over the world. This is a tendency, unfortunately. So my hypothesis here is that violence against women in politics is today a product of the anti-gender transnational campaigns as palpable counter-movements, and the use of violence and the use of gender ideology also. That is something that I won't talk here today, but it's really important. And these two movements, these two strategies, to use violence against women in politics, and to diffuse these two words, gender ideology, that is something that was built by the Vatican during the after the circle of many UN conferences about women's human rights, is today counter strategies to feminist and LGBTQ social movements, in my opinion. Recent anti-gender activity transcends isolated and uncoordinated instances of resistance and instead operates within distinct and coordinated counter-movements to defeat feminist and LGBTQ policy. Anti-genderism and its adoption of gender ideology rhetoric, and also the strategic and intentional use of violence against women in politics are first and foremost conservative responses to the emancipatory claims about gender, sex, sexuality, and second, political mechanisms used to contain policy developments associated with feminist, anti-racist, and queer agendas. Almost 2 years ago, we have the assassination of Marielle Franco in Rio de Janeiro. That was a black local leader and local representative that was killed in the streets. And there are suspicion, a very strong suspicion, that the son of Bolsonaro is involved in this assassination, you know. And the political feminicides are also increasing in Brazil. And this was just the point, one of them, you know. So the increase on violence against women in politics, for me, is associated with the recent battles of gender ideology and can thus be conceptualized as a practical counter-strategy that aims, first, to refute claims concerning to hierarchical construction of sex, gender, race, and heterosexuality, order on the democratic advances in politics. Two, they try to re-essentialize and delegitimize feminist, anti-racist, and queer initiatives toward political institutionalized process and spaces. They try also to frustrate global and local gender and sexuality mainstreaming efforts to transform politics and transform the state, the traditional forms of organization of the states that are patriarchal, that are racist, that are LGBT-phobic, and also to thwart gender and racist and LGBTQ equality politics and policies. And finally, they try to reaffirm the white, heteropatriarchal conceptions of gender, sex, race, sexuality in politics. So this is the first step. I will go forward, you know, I'm just in academic, here, Olympic academic effort, and you just stop me if I am going too fast, please, but I have many things to talk about, and so I would like to go faster. And in Latin American region today, we have declared, we have organized a regional declaration about violence against women in politics. In 2015, la Declaración sobre la Violencia y el Acoso Político contra las Mujeres de la OEA. This is something that we have in the regional systems of the regional system of human rights in the Americas, you know. That's for you to see that it's something that is really concerning our countries in the South. So, Dilma's case. I will start with the words of a colleague that just write. We had an entire issue of the magazine Science, the journal Science, about the new right, the globalization of the new right and gender. So I will start with the words of a colleague that wrote an article that for me it's Joseph J. Souza. The article is has this title, Subversive Mother and Killjoy, Sexism Against Dilma Rousseff and the Social Imaginary of Brazil's Rightward Turn. I will begin with the first paragraph of his work. On August 31, 2016, Dilma Rousseff, Brazil's first female president and second consecutive president of the left-wing Workers' Party, Partido dos Trabalhadores, or PT, was removed from office following impeachment proceedings. Following her election in 2010, Rousseff's tenure saw intense social upheaval and political polarization, beginning with mass protests against cost of living increases in 2013 and subsequent movements against corruption, the World Cup spending, and eventually protests for and against her removal. To impeachment supporters, Rousseff's removal represented success for Brazilian democracy. Rousseff was removed via legal procedures, without military intervention, and in the name of transparent governance. Two opponents of impeachment, both affiliated of the PT and its left-wing critics, Dilma Rousseff's removal was a parliamentary coup. Rousseff was tried for malfeasance in office for delaying repayments to the central bank, a common budgeting maneuver done by her predecessors, although increasingly used by Rousseff during an economic downturn. Although she had never been accused of taking bribes, many key congressional players who impeached and removed her were under investigation at the time of her impeachment, and some have subsequently been convicted. This is the case of the Speaker of the House that started the impeachment process. Rousseff reiterated her argument with the slogan, "Impeachment without a high crime is a coup." She repeated the phrase on television and in press conferences so often that her supportive audiences could finish the sentences at rallies. So, this is the situation about social movements in Brazil when Dilma was impeached. We have hundreds of thousands of women in the streets in Brazil from 2000 to just today. We have finally achieved a mass movement, feminist movement in Brazil. We have these three huge marches that took place. The Rural Women's March, the Black Women's March, and this year, for the first time, the Indigenous Women's March. And also, we have in Brazil many street protests against this movement that were taking place to de-democratize the state in Brazil. So we have Fora Cunha in 2015, and all of those in your right are protests that women and feminist movements were completely involved. They tried to bring people to the streets. And these protests were really huge, millions of people in the streets. Fica Dilma, mulheres com Dilma, não vai ter golpe, fora Temer, Lula livre e ele não. So those were only some of the protests that were taking place and are still taking place in Brazil today. During the process of admission of Dilma's impeachment, we were having in Brazil, in Brasilia, the 4th National Conference for Public Policies for Women in Brazil. And many women chained themselves on the bars on the security bars of Palácio do Planalto, and also went to welcome President Dilma when she left the Palácio do Planalto. So I don't know if people are aware about that, because women were actually the supporters of Dilma when she was impeached in Brazil, you know. And the coup in Brazil against Dilma was in many ways misogynist. And the whole process was preceded and campaigned and succeeded by intense reinforcement and of aggressive deconstruction of the president's own person, demonstrating sometimes in disguise, sometimes notoriously, different levels of violent sexist prejudice. This presentation works methodologically with a social-political approach on images. I understand that in a world and in a moment where we are crossed by false speeches, by fake news, and also in a post-truth era, the political use and analysis of images, cartoons, memes, figurative jokes, photographs, pictures, magazine covers can help us more clearly to state how and what is in our collective and current memories and sensibilities. So I am using here, I will follow Silvia Rivera Kusikanski, that is a decolonial Bolivarian feminist. I will follow her steps and use the sociology of image, or an image sociological political approach, as a decolonizing praxis. Images can make us access the political and subversive dimensions of research in the field of multifaceted and plural collective memory. And the images here will serve as our point of view of the rupture with the logic of presence, and showing absences and facilitating access to the blind spots of the university knowledge. So here are some first images about the street process during Dilma's impeachment. So you can see many of them. I started to take pictures. I went to these protests to take pictures because this was something that I had to do, you know. I had to do something. So I wouldn't go to this protests, but I went there just to see what was happening. So many of these pictures I took myself. And this is the official media in Brazil. You can see many covers, magazines. And this one I will show you just after. This is a flea in the face of Dilma, and the photographer intentionally, I don't know how to say a mira, a gun target in the face of Dilma. You know, this is one of the most important journals in Brazil. And so, very briefly, I would like to explore with you this research that when I identified 11 mechanisms of political sexist violence, and the number 1 just to the number 8 are exclusively, in my opinion, experienced with a political woman, a woman that is in the political space. This happens with Dilma, but my hypothesis is that many women that are in political situations, that are in many important posts of political decision, they are decision makers. They experience somehow in many different ways this kind of stuff that I would like to show you. And the three, the number 9, number 10, and 11 that are really, really tough strategies, I can see, and I found material, empirical photographs, empirical pictures about men and women experiencing the same violence, you know. So the first one, the linkage and association with a master figure of a political man. This is so common. Women are not themselves. They are someone. There are always someone. Someone is always a man that his father, his political leader, and or in the case of Dilma is Lula, obviously, and also Cuba, because she's a communist bitch, you know? That's the words they use to call her frequently in Brazil. So a clear attempt to slide line her political position while legitimizing male public and political figure. The second mechanism, the reinforcement of her image in the stereotyped place of mothering, of being a mother. In Brazil, we have a social development program that was named PAC, Programa de Aceleração do Crescimento, and she was the mother of PAC, you know, this image. Even Lula said that publicly. And she was, in her campaign for the first time in 2010, she used also in her campaign this image of being the mother of PAC and mother of people in Brazil. You know, this was a trend that I think it's just much more approximate with populism, that this is a strategy to that. But in this specific sense, attempt to use maternage symbolism and stereotyping in a positive stigmatization here. So the third mechanism and dispositive is Dilma's classification as hysterical, dumb, witch, or crazy person. This is so usual in Brazil, and many times here. I am following now the squad for women that the United States elected in 2018. And this is something that is in the Twitter and also in Instagram, the images. For example, Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, they named her occasional cortex. This is almost all the time. I have printed hundreds of tweets that call her occasional cortex, you know. So this is something that is beyond the situation of the impeachment of Dilma Rousseff, in my opinion. And that's why I'm here. I would like to understand if this dispositives, this configuration of violence is also usual and take place in a strong, institutionalized democracy. That's not the case of Brazil, but it is the case of the United States, you know. So the other mechanism, the use of the corporality, the sexuality, and the body, usually in a negative way, you know. This is a cover of Veja magazine when the 2013's protests begin in Brazil. In the eye of Dilma is a money de 20 centavos. That was the protests on urban transportation that the students starts to do in São Paulo. And you can see many others uses of the Dilma's bodies and in really negative ways, you know. So using the women's bodies, stigmatizing, ridiculing, devaluating them is an almost classic form of female disqualification. You won't see images and pictures of that about men's bodies. Not this way. Not this way. This is a car sticker that spread out all over Brazil in the Dilma's second campaign. The simulation and the apology of rape crime in Brazil. That is a crime in Brazil. Apology of rape is a crime in Brazil. And violence and sexual violence, including rape, is a borderline attempt to subject, to second, and to humiliate women. And she was already our president, when this happens. The use of open imaginary strategies for silencing Dilma's public voice and to explicit attempt to silence her. We in Brazil have a, I don't know how to say bordão, alguém sabe? Nobody can help. A refrain that is culturally many repetition in the people's voice that, cala a boca Dilma. Shut up, Dilma. This was really something. Everybody starts to say that when she appears publicly, So this was also very common. And this one I would like to stop just briefly talking about this, because pot banging protests are traditionally employed in South America to register dissatisfaction with the government. This is a practice all over the South Cone in Latin America, But this Brazilian pot banging were directly toward television, and specifically against the televised image of Dilma Rousseff on the sound of her voice. After that, hegemonic media were in charge of publishing cartoons like those ones, like this, bringing physical violence against Dilma Rousseff to the forefront of the Panelaço protests. This is not only to make pot banging, but also to hit Dilma with the pans and the pots, This is something that it's slightly different. And another mechanism is the reversing of gender stereotypes to undermine women in politics. I'll show you only 2 cases. There are other cases, but this one is, I'll address this one because it was first of that one. Abortion, the discussion about reproductive rights in Brazil are always a challenge. We have the Catholic Church, the Evangelical Church in Brazil. During the campaign in 2010 against José Serra, that was the other candidate that were disputing the presidency with Dilma, the theme of abortion came out. So during the political campaign, the same theme, abortion, was dealt with radical differences by the official media in the same week. Regarding Dilma, the subject were openly disapproving because she changed her position. She was defending the decriminalization of abortion, and during the campaign, she wrote a letter to religious leaders saying that she won't deal with this subject in her government. So the cover of the Veja magazine just make this change of position, and look at the colors. She was in red and something like that. And the next cover in the next week, it was sobre José Serra, that was giving him a complete different treatment, calling him as a saint and the paladin of the Brazilian family. And I need to mention that during the same week, in Brazil, the wife of José Serra declared, a video went publicly of José Serra's wife saying that she made an abortion. And this was the treatment that official media have him, and the other treatment about Dilma Rousseff position about abortion. And this other one is is completely common, also very common. Assertivity versus aggressivity. When Dilma demonstrates her attitude of firmness and assertiveness, she was read as tough, as rude, and hysterical, and aggressive in politics. And this is Dunga, that was a football coach. When he talks aggressively, the official media calls him the gift of the fury, a strong positive leadership. So this is completely different treatment about situations that are very alike. So the next mechanisms you will see politics in that also are being treated just this way. It's horrible also because it's something that it is completely astonishing to see. But the criminalization and the condemnatory treatment, Rousseff as a prisoner, also Lula almost all the time is treated as a prisoner. The animalization of Dilma's image. You see, this is processes of dehumanization of those persons, you know. They're animals, not persons, not humans. This is so common with Dilma. And galinha in Brazil has specifically significations, you know, just like prostitutes or something like that. And vaca also, and cow also. And demonization also. Many of cartoons and images, memes in the internet. And the use of strategies of annihilation and execution by decapitation. This image, this one, in Jornal Globo, was in 2016, in the age of March, in the International Day of Women. This is in the front page of O Globo in Brazil. And also execution by shooting or hanging. So frequent, so common. So many researchers have already examined the experiences of women politicians in several countries and found, for example, that media portrays in their traditional gender roles. What I am describing here is that this is stigmatization, this stereotyping opens the door to a political treatment that has been violently sexist and misogynist. It is about escalation, the escalation in the gender discrimination that I am talking about. It's not only stigmatized, it's being political violent with political women. It's not just a stigmatization, but rather a collectively and orchestrated effort to maintain, through the use of sexist political violence, the formal political space as a male, white, hetero privilege. It is about sustaining a model for institutional political exercise that violates political women and political rights of women. This is a necessary and urgent denunciation for several reasons, but above all, because it prevents the patriarchal, misogynist, and sexist structures to power and politics from being finally transformed. I'm not saying that the violence is the only factor that is responsible for the exclusion of women in politics. But when women see images like that spread all over her daily life, in the television, in the magazines, in the journals, in the internet, in the Facebook, what do you think they think? What do you think they want to do? Run for politics? Of course not. And now we are living some different strategies because the sons of women that are in politics are being threatened in many ways. This is something that is happening also with men. Jean Willis has his mother threatened. We have virtual militias that are persecuting women in politics, almost all the time. So, the last point I'm finishing is that I would like to understand that this escalation of violence against women is an indicator or a proxy variable of the escalation of political violence all over Brazil. And in my opinion, gender, race, ethnicity, sexuality, they are not identity problems. They are fundamentally democratizing borderlines. We are not talking about customs, moral values, identity. Not only, we are talking not only about that. We are talking about the frontier, the borderline of democracy, where democracy went or where she didn't. This is the line. So ongoing de-democratization in Brazil reveals processes of democratic agony in its initial stage, and the escalation of social and political authoritarianism in the country is today a reality. We have people being killed in the streets, because they are with red shirts. And I'm not exaggerating. This is still happening in Brazil. This is happening just right now. We have many signs that we need to understand that this political violence as a process of de-democratization that is really happening in Brazil. That's it. Thank you.
Few of the questions.
Yeah. We can cry together too.
Any questions?
One thing that I would like to say is that I am from political science department, and mainly my colleagues at the Department of Political Science, they don't think this is something important to democracy, They always are saying that the problem of the democracy are the institutions, the rules, the procedures, and many things like that. This is the periphery of the debate. And my point here is that this is not the periphery. This is the central. Our central points are race, our gender, and sexuality issues. For a really democratized state, if we had these advances on the rights of those people, we have democracy. If we don't have democracy. This is the point here. And I would like my colleagues to hear that and to really understand that, because for many of them, we were at APSA, weren't we, American Political Science Association Congress last month with a panel about Bolsonaro's government. There was nobody there, almost nobody there, 5, 6 people. They're not interested in I understand what is happening in Brazil, but we were interested in saying what was happening in Brazilian state, because we don't think that this is only an issue for Brazil, This is happening all over the world. This is happening in Europe. This is happening here in the United States. This is happening everywhere. And we have to be aware. And things like that, violence against women in politics, the disputes around gender ideology are symptoms of these right-wing advances all over the world. We have to to see that and understand this way, because they are really important. They are in the core of the democratic debate today, not in the periphery. That's my point.
I have a question.
Okay.
Thank you so much for your talk. And my question has to do with sort of perhaps a progressive response to this conservative wave. So a lot of the research that's been done on conservatism lately has sort of pointed to a gender divide actually on political formation of youth, where women tend to form as more progressive and men tend to form as more conservative. And this, I mean, at least the recent research in that sense. And with the US, we just saw more women running for office within the Democratic Party, and a larger turnout of women in this latest midterms. And I'm wondering, because I think that this discourse, and I think that's your argument, it reflects within the institution and the procedures of political, this institutionalized politics, right?
Yeah.
And I'm wondering if you think we are going to see in the next Brazilian elections a larger turnout of women, because I also know that in Brazil, women have been sort of co-opted for conservative purposes as well. So those 15% of women in Congress, not all of them are progressive women, right?
Of course.
There's a large percentage that are actually women from Bolsonaro's party and women from evangelical and neo-Pentecostal backgrounds.
Yeah.
And so I'm wondering if our political system, the way it's structured, sort of allows for the sort of takeover of women that is significant, in a sense, in the next election.
Okay, Marina. Thank you for this question. You make give me the opportunity to say about it's not at all bad things that are happening in Brazil. You know, we have a sort of reinvention of the representation also by women's hands in Brazil. We have, for example, the collective mandates in Brazil that are really taking place, and that this is a feminist approach about this exclusion on the parliamentary spaces, you know. Women in Brazil are running collectively, not only one woman, but 4 women, 5 women, 11 women for one post, you know. And they build this front line with many women, many black women, many peripheral women, lesbian women, trans women. So we have an intersexual activism today, feminist activism today in Brazil. This is really important. And they are running for politics. We have this experience of the collective mandates in Belo Horizonte. The first one was Gabinetona. We have in Rio de Janeiro. We have in São Paulo. And we have in Pernambuco. And I think for the next elections, we will have this spread out for many states in Brazil. This is a resistance strategy to this process that blocks access to women to politics. But I think it is important. It is really something that is happening. I have students that are researching about this. But it is necessary, but it's not sufficient. You know, this is not sufficient to address this amount of violence, these rocks that are in front of women's representation and participation. Because women's all over the world, they are in the first steps of participation, all over the social movements, all over different social movements, not only in the feminist movements, you have women. When you escalate in the positions of power, women disappear. This is a phenomenon all over the world. And this is what I am calling the privilege, the male mandate, political mandate privilege, that they don't want to let it out, you know. And so I think we have, I don't know if we have this gender divide in Brazil, because we have men that are progressive and women that are also conservative in Brazil. I think, I don't remember the percentage, but many, I think 10% of the 50% are women that are conservative, you know. You have two routes, mainly routes to exceed the parliament in Brazil. Social movements and capital for men, delegate capital for the structure of the patriarchal organization of power in Brazil. You have a father, you have a husband, you have a political leader that is pushing you. So women go to this route, mainly in Brazil. This is very common in Brazil. And that's it. I don't think that we can see this gender divide. Women that are more progressive and men are more conservative. I think in Brazil this is not the way the things are, really. And we are trying to resist, you know. We have this huge protests in the streets. The Elinão was a huge movement, millions of women in the streets against Jair Bolsonaro. And I have colleagues from my department that say to me, yeah, your movement helped to elect Jair Bolsonaro. Goodness sake, you know? Difficult way to talk with those people, you know? And what else do you want us to do, you know? Wash the dishes and go home and do nothing, as you do nothing at all. So that's it. Thank you, everybody. Thank you.